My name is Pamela, and I'll be talking about Chapter 14 today, The Search for a Criminal Man Revisited, Biosocial Theories. It's divided into several sections of chapter, so I'll go ahead and start with the introduction. This chapter piggybacks off of Chapter 2, where it discusses Lombroso's early biological theories due to the popularity Darwinism had in science during the 19th century. During the 1960s and 70s is when biological sciences started to become part of social science, especially when DNA became part of the genetics realm. Various sociologists such as Lee Ellis, E.O. Wilson, and Dawkins published articles promising, in a sense, that they'd integrate biological concepts back into theories, sociology theories, to a more modern take. The momentum of criminology came with the position of social power to confirm what criminology's theories gained importance. The big breakthroughs in biology contributed to a major push in biological criminologists. The perspective and importance to understand biosocial theory was that it would help explain genetics affected certain forms of behavior when it came to crime, and also to help understand the genetic structure itself. A big project that assisted was the 2005 Human Genome Project. The modernization of the 20th and the 21st century influenced the way genetics were studied, surrounding biosocial criminology, such as media and technology advancements, were what contributed to those big pushes. Um, Even with other sociologists not agreeing with biosocial argument in criminology, theorists still continued for biosocial theory. In the section of evolutionary psychology, Darwin Revisited, it goes over evolutionary psychology, which is defined as efforts to explain psychological traits. And for this chapter, the traits studied are surrounding criminality, I'm sorry. It then goes on to theoretical diversity, and there's 5 different theories in this section regarding psychological traits. The first theory is the cheater theory. This theory goes over that males develop strategies to pass on their genetic code. It links it with criminality because there's a sense of disregard for morals, meaning that the male's more likely to commit crime or crimes. The RK theory theorizes that people reproduce differently, either through the R strategy, which is reproducing at a large rate and not spending time caring for the offspring. The K strategy is reproducing at a slower rate and caring for the offspring more. Theorists conclude that the R strategy, which is reproducing at a larger rate and not taking care of the offspring, is associated with criminality, and they look for certain biological markers at the beginning, such as low birth rate, large number of siblings, earlier maturation, and earlier involvement in sexual activity. The third theory is the conditional adaptation theory, and it's based on a Darwinian view, having an antisocial way of being due to adapting or growing up in an unhealthy and gaining biological markers of developing early and participating in sexual activity at an early age as well. This is to successfully reproduce and pass on your genetics. The fourth theory is the alternative adaptive theory. People who are extremely antisocial and in order to reproduce and pass on their genetics have a high sex drive, are aggressive, and have lower intelligence. And the fifth theory is the evolutionary exploitative theory, that all humans are genetically hardwired to find a mate and confirm reproduction through obtaining certain resources. Some humans have the strategy of ensuring gaining resources through expropriate resources by victimizing others. The assessment of this section is that these theories have been categorized as evolutionary ecological theories, as they aren't purely biological, but they're biosocial. The contributions these theorists have to study criminality is the selfish gene, which leads to evolutionary reproduction, but other theorists criticize that this concept as it contributes to an abusive society, a perspective, a dog-eat-dog world. Theorists also argue that this perspective has a blind spot for not acknowledging that environment also has a part to play in the individual. Another section in this chapter is the social concern theory of the evolutionary psychology revisited. So theorists Agnew's perspective on crime is that there are four elements surrounding social concern, and those are the care about welfare for others, desire close ties to certain others, and emotional and cooperative nature, follow certain moral intuitions, and punish those who violate those intuitions. Also, to conform to a behavior in view of others, social norms, and sanction those who violate such norms. Agnew stated that social concern has a direct negative effect on crime. The reason is that those who are around criminals are more likely to commit cr- crimes because of the environment that they are in. Social concern also has a positive in it, is that it leads to community and togetherness within the society. Agnew noted that the perspective of biology, social concern isn't developed through social interaction, but it's gained naturally. It comes early in life and is seen in other primates as well that are not human. And it develops because of that, it's developed through evolutionary process. Another section in this chapter is the neuroscience, neurological, and biochemical theories. Neuroscience is important to take into account regarding biosocial theories because of the neurologic side of it as well as the biochemical side of it. It impacts those aspects greatly. How each affects each other, and there's great variations produced within those two aspects. An example discussed is that psychopaths are noted to have a dysfunctional amygdala, and this affects the need to get what they want, regardless of the dangers of the consequences, as long as they get to where they want to be. Twins have also been a major research study for theorists in order to compare different factors from one another. Another section of the neuroscience and biochemical theories is the neurological theories. There's 5 different important neurological theories surrounding theorist Mednick's thesis, which is that criminals have an autonomic nervous system that is less perceptive to the surrounding environments. It makes antisocial behavior less likely. This is to understand better that 1% of the population was committing more crimes than half of the population was. The brain hemispheric theory, that psychopaths rely more on the left hemisphere which is associated with linguistics than the right hemisphere. This means that the person is less likely to able to develop emotional bonds because they don't use their right hemisphere as often. The reward dominance theory, criminality is run by 2 opposing brain circuit systems, the behavioral activity system and the behavioral inhibition system. So they're both contradicting each other. The prefrontal lobe theory, this area of the brain is associated with self-control, and depending on the area of the prefrontal lobe that's affected by lesions, gray matter, or low glucose, affects the person differently. So the left lobe is associated with positive attributes, while the right lobe is associated with negative attributes, such as antisocial behavior. The dorsolateral lobe is linked with being distracted and low functioning, and the orbitofrontal lobe is linked with connections, conduct disorder, and antisocial personality disorder. Another theory is suboptimal arousal theory, because the person has a low reactive autonomic nervous system, are seen as fearless, or they go to extremes to prevent boredom because their brain waves are functioning on a slower brain wave, which is the theta and or delta waves. And the seizuring theory is a continuation of Lombroso's earlier theories regarding epilepsy. He believed that seizures led to greater brain degeneration. The support that this is given now is that epilepsy runs 3 times higher in incarcerated people. This theory is this theory is the most debated theory because it's hard to detect damage in the brain and doesn't take into account other variables that could also be affecting the brain degeneration. Biochemical theories, they're the foundation of biosocial theories because it focuses on the brain chemistry of the body and not just the neuroscience aspect of it. It goes into greater detail for the reward dominance theory, which is that reward centers are located in the areas of the brain more associated with criminality, the behavior activating system, which is easily triggered and is developed early in evolutionary theory. Development, I'm sorry. Sex hormone theory is associated with males and connected between testosterone and aggression. And because of the aggression, it's harder to maintain casual relationships. Evolutionary neuroandrogenic theory, the effect of testosterone when it comes to criminality. So the low testosterone reaction to the environment surrounding and the person, as well as natural selection in regards to competition. So natural selection takes over certain aspects, which is related to the evolutionary perspective. Sex hormone and neurotransmitted driven theories explain criminality from the perspective of gender, why males are more aggressive than females. Regarding females, the perspective of sex hormone theories is the premenstrual syndrome and postpartum depression, which are caused from hormonal imbalances that can affect judgment and violent behavior. The con of biochemical theories is the variation in the results, and what causes all these issues and disorders are a big variation, so it's harder to pinpoint. An example that was brought up was how testosterone is associated with aggression, but so is low serotonin, and dopamine also affects moods. Low serotonin is also linked to impulsivity, negative emotions. Low serotonin is also associated with memory and learning loss, which can lead to depression. The amygdala plays a big part in self-control, which affects aversion and criminality according to theorists. Adolescence plays a big part in the brain that develops and can cause many issues to develop into adulthood, such as the life course persistence slash adolescence limited theory, that a small percent of people develop antisocial disorders from youth to adolescence into adulthood. And these are often associated with lower IQ, hyperactivity, inactiveness, negative emotionality, and low impulse control. The assessment in this section is because of neuroscientific research, biosocial criminality has developed rapidly with a more modern perspective. The hope is to understand how the systems interact with each other and not just see how the systems interact themselves. The next section, the final section of this chapter is genetics. To understand the behavior of genetics, molecular genetics, and epigenetics to comprehend the connection between genotypes and phenotypes. So the behavior genetics is to understand the difference between inherited traits and those developed by the environment through comparing environments such as twin studies. So being able to see what might affect one twin's trait depending on the environment that it's in. The point of this is to differentiate the criminality traits and whether they were inherited or developed through the environments themselves. Molecular genetics, the effect of genetics has on traits behaviors specifically studied through the DNA structure. It's able to detect the genetics at play when it comes to nature versus nurture. The relationship between the gene and the environment is either passive active or evocative. My apologies. Passive is being that the trait is inherited genetically and through the parental environment. Active is that the person looks for the environment that suits them best. And evocative is being that the people are able to get different results from their environment and are able to make their own surroundings. So epigenetics is a newer perspective in biosocial theory. It is that people are able to get different results from their environment. Oh, I'm sorry. That the environment changes the genetics functions without affecting the DNA structure itself. It's done so through epigenome, which assists in adapting the gene to the environment it's in. The example given is that what a pregnant woman eats can affect their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren and can do so through many generations. Or how antisocial behavior can also be passed down through genetics due to the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal function that can be affected from childhood abuse. The assessment on this section of genetics, it's suggested by the authors as the genetics variations range greatly. There's a huge range that needs to be studied within this area. So they suggested that the funds to study this genetics would be better put to use if they actually went towards funding schools to assist those with study skills who have issues with study skills, to assist the teachers and to improve the school environment itself for the student and the teacher. The conclusion on this chapter is that biosocial theory has been brought up to a more modern age with thanks to the evolutionary psychology, neuroscience, and genetics in regards to further understanding criminality. We must also understand that crime and criminality are socially constructed ideas and biological concepts, as well as sociology concepts, must expand their definitions and thoughts in order to expand the concepts and interchange definitions and ideas more easily throughout biosocial theory and sociology itself. So that's the conclusion of chapter 14. Thank you for listening.